Welcome everyone to our webinar on sensing, receiving, and following divine guidance. I found inspiration for this topic from a number of sources. One of them was an old joke. It's one of my favorites. I'm sure many of you have heard it, but I will retell it again. So there's a fellow living along the banks of the Mississippi River, could be in Iowa or could be further south, and he senses the waters are rising, but he's a religious man, has always been very devoted, prays to God every day, goes to church every Sunday, and he believes that God will spare him. And so he hears a evacuation announcement on the radio or television, and he thinks, yes, I understand the waters are rising, but I'm a faithful man, a devoted man, and I'll just pray to God and I'll be okay. And the waters rise, and after a while, his house is completely surrounded, and a boat comes along, and the people in the boat call out, that he should come and get in the boat and escape the rising waters. And he says, no, I am a faithful man. I will stay in my house and pray to God, and God will protect me. After a while, he finds himself on the roof of his house, and a helicopter comes along and, drops a ladder and says, climb up. And he says, no, I am a faithful man. I know the waters will not rise higher. I will be okay. So he gets to the pearly gates, and St. Peter greets him, and he is welcomed, of course, as a devout man. But he says to St. Peter, why is it that I'm here? I am a devout man. I pray to God. I prayed fiercely that the waters should not rise and sweep me away. And it didn't work. What happened? What was the problem? And St. Peter says, well, you didn't take the opportunities. And he said, but I prayed. I demand that God give me an explanation. So St. Peter, in a good mood that day, particularly lets him go and see God. And he says his story to God, and God says, what do you want of me? I sent you radio warnings. I sent you a boat. I sent you a helicopter. So this is all about the signs, the messages, and the subtle impulses that we get that tell us how divine guidance wants us to move in this world. And this story just brings it out so very much that we receive these messages. We often do not recognize them as such, and we may not follow the recommendations and guidance that we receive. So that's the topic for tonight, is to explore these, what these impulses are, what these messages are, what the signs and clues are that nature gives us as to what we should be doing, and how to recognize them as divine guidance, and thus to move with that so that our life serves our divine purpose that we are here for, so that we can best enjoy our life. And I guess I should say right at the beginning, that does not mean that we will not face challenges, and that does not mean that it will always be blissful and delightful. In life, as we have all, those of us who've lived a little while now, have discovered, there are indeed challenges. And even when we follow our guidance, sometimes our guidance leads us into the valley, you know which valley I mean, and that we have to deal with great challenges, often existential challenges, challenges to our very life, so that we grow and move towards enlightenment. I'm going to give you an example. I actually put this up on the Partnership for Wellbeing Facebook page. You can go and see it there in detail. Tonight I'll just run through it a bit briefly if I can. But I was reading some advice from an online marketing consultant, which I try to do from time to time so that I get ideas for what I might be doing. And this particular day, this consultant said, actually quoting a line from someone else, "Do the work, let God worry about your Facebook following." And somehow that always reminded me of the I believe it's Arab admonition, trust in God and tie up your camel. So it means that we have to be practical. We have to follow the guidance we get. We can believe in God, trust in God, but we still may face challenges. And so we tie up our camel and we do our work and, not worry about the relative thing of, gee, do I have enough Facebook followers? But simply do the work and try to do it the best we can. And then let Facebook take care of the rest of it with its own algorithms. I got advice. This is part of the same general story of how I got to this topic tonight. And how I got there was a wonderful example of following or finding, receiving guidance of what I should be doing, and then actually following that guidance. So the second step of this was that I got advice from a good friend and sometimes client. I was asking about, what should I do for this webinar tonight? And I was without a topic, which doesn't happen to me very often, but I couldn't come up with anything. And so he made the suggestion, which I then wrote out in the form that became the title of the webinar that you've seen, Sensing and Responding to the Divine's Impulses, Messages, and Clues. So these two pieces of guidance that I received came in verbal form. And so I'd classify them as messages. That is to say, messages are one of the ways that the divine communicates with us. We sometimes hear things in words, and those words may come to us just within our head, or they may come to us because somebody speaks them or has written them out, and we read them somewhere. So we may hear them or see them, or we may perceive them inside our head as a thought. And so messages are a very common way that the divine tries to guide us. And messages are probably the easiest way of receiving information because they come typically in a language that we're familiar with. The other two ways, the impulses of nature and the clues or signs that we receive, are more open to question. But when we get a message in some way, it's a little bit easier to trust that what we're receiving is indeed intended as guidance for us. And I'm going to go into the details of the accepting, trusting process in a little bit here. Clues and signs that appear are often opportunities or obstacles to the fulfillment of some desire that we have. What I mean by that is we may be thinking that we want to do something like take a trip, and we may find that we get clues that we should do this by the fact that suddenly we have some extra money that we could spend, or that somebody tells us something, or pardon me, that would be a message, that somebody, some company, some advertisement, comes our way that suggests a tour that we might want to take, or a place we might want to visit, and it resonates with us. The way we recognize the clue or sign, that is to say that something that happens to us is a divine guidance for us, is that there's a sense of resonance, there's a sense of good feeling about that. Like, oh, that's important. I should pay attention to that. So that kind of resonance is one of the ways in which we know that something that has come to us as a sign or a clue is indeed divine guidance. Impulses in contrast, are very, very subtle. They're a kind of gentle feeling, almost a little bit, you might say, of a pressure within to move in a certain direction, to do a certain thing, to say something or do something that we feel, generally we feel it's right, but sometimes impulses are contrary to what our intellect would like to hold, like to believe. And that makes the impulses, they're the subtlest, but they're the most abstract in terms of our sensing them and trusting that they're real. Because if you think about it, you have impulses all the time. There's subtle feelings. Oh, do this, do that, don't do this, don't do that. I'd like this, I wouldn't like that. Those come to us all the time. So the question is, how do we know which of those really are divine guidance? And so that brings me to the topic of the recognition of any of these, that is, say, messages, clues, signs, or impulses of nature that are trying to tell us what we should be doing, what nature is requiring of us if we're just open to receiving the messages and following them. We talked, or I mentioned when I was talking about the clues, that there's a sense of resonance with us, that what comes to us is a right thing to do. It's a message for us. It's a divine guidance for us. Impulses are really the same. They're just very subtle. And in order to perceive them, we really need to settle in to ourself. We need to be in a more self-referral state. We need to be present with what's going on, which means that we are witness to what's going on in a quiet way. We're very settled, a very quiet way. And then we have that sense that, yes, that's trying to tell me what I should be doing now. And, if you think about it, there are myriad examples. Often they're very trivial. Should I go to lunch now or half hour from now? And if you actually ask that question in a very innocent way, then what you get back in that next instant, and the other thing is the answers come in an instant. If you wait more than an instant, what happens is the intellect gets engaged and starts evaluating, right? People are nodding their head, yeah, I know that one, right? And then you start judging whether or not that is valid information or whether it's just a consideration that the mind is playing with, and there could be other considerations. So the thing about it is that the impulses and answers to our inquiries come very instantaneously, very spontaneously, and sometimes they are very, very surprising. That is, something may come to you that if you thought about it for a moment, you'd say, I would never have thought of that. That has to be some kind of divine guidance because it is so beyond or out of the way I would normally think of a situation. Some people call that thinking out of the box. And for some people, that is kind of the way they operate all the time. Many people grew up that way. Many children are very imaginative and will just, oh, I'll do this, I'll do this, I'll do this. And they just make things up all the time. And the mind just keeps running. And the imagination just keeps running. And they just live in that present in a very innocent way. And so they go through things. I happen to be watching on television the new season 2 of the Netflix show Anne with an E. And Anne is Anne of Green Gables. Many of you know the story. The Anne with an E is a liberal adaptation with a lot of things added to it that are not in the original. But it's beautifully done because Anne is a classic example of someone whose mind is constantly filled with ideas beyond the common realm. And, that we call it imagination, and she can just make things up. I've been working with a young client, who has a very similar mind, just very fluid mind. Just imagination runs all the time. And it's extremely valuable because that mind can process all kinds of stuff, which if we were doing it in the psychological way of, tell me about your dreams or tell me about your thoughts, and then they start telling, and they're very frightening. They can be very scary and can be interpreted as a little too much, a little beyond the line of everything is okay in there, and so we can use that fluidity of the mind, though, in someone like that to solve all manner of psychological pressures and disturbances without ever doing any psychology at all, because the mind will just do it on its own. And it takes almost no guidance even. It just an opportunity. You just set the stage and the mind just does its thing and everything gets better. And so it's a really, really beautiful thing to see happen. A key element in this process of recognizing the messages, the signs, the clues, and the impulses is noticing what you notice. I got that phrase from my training in matrix energetics now quite a number of years ago. And it was one of the most valuable phrases, that phrase, notice what you notice, in my whole training, because it helped the intellect to understand that what shows up when you tune in to that subtleness within you, that settled state within you, that what shows up actually is meaningful, but it's only there for an instant. And so you have to notice that it was there, that it is there, and then just notice it. You just have to just notice it. You don't have to do anything, you just notice it. But it's in the noticing, it's in the attention that the energy begins to shift, or that allows the energy to shift and produce very significant changes in one's life. I hope my sound is coming through okay. It looks like the volume is all right. I'm trying a new trick tonight, and I set the microphone perhaps just a little bit far away from me. Try it right there. I think that's good enough. Noticing is a skill that when we settle, we just go, what's there? If any of you have done mindfulness meditation, this is very much part of mindfulness meditation. It's not necessary to do mindfulness in order to learn to notice. It's only a matter of putting your attention on it. What is there? So there are some steps that we can go through to get into that, into noticing that, and we'll do a little exercise, I think, before we start the group clearing part of this exercise, this webinar on noticing. But let me just go through the steps. I wrote them out here, so if you see me looking down, it's because I'm trying to stay with the order in which I wrote them. Until you get really familiar with this, and I'm actually going to say this in the first person. I started this exercise of speaking in the first person when I'm talking to my group, because you're supposed to hear that as you're saying it to yourself. I am doing this, like that. So when I start this process, the first thing I try to do is just to sit comfortably. Now, I have to confess that I've been doing this for so long that I've gotten to the point where I can do it, standing up with my eyes open, in a conversation with somebody, when I'm called upon to do so. And it's actually one of the things I quite enjoy, because I can meet somebody out on the street somewhere downtown here in Fairfield, and they'll ask me a question, and I'll give them the, you might say, the existential answer that is not just, the immediate answer to their question, but what the divine process is that's organizing that, because I can just automatically tune into that. And it's particularly true when people ask me either about their own well-being, their own health, or that of someone else. And the mere asking of the question evokes the answer. the real answer to the question, that the answer that comes from the divine level rather than just from the relative level of life, from the level of the intellect, if you want to think of it that way, or even on the level of feelings. And so just settling and tuning in. And so that settling process, and I think you can all just do that along with me now, and I'll take you into this and we'll just begin the exercise. And then when we move into the group clearing session, we'll do this a little bit more formally, and we can actually work on real stuff, which some of you may find you're working on that when we do just this exercise of getting in touch with that level of ourselves. So we settle in, and it's often good to adjust your posture if you need to, your position. Are you sitting comfortably? Check in with your body. Are you comfortable? Are you seated in a comfortable position? Is your back supported well? Is your head the way you want it? Sometimes people roll their head, stretch their neck a little bit, or they stretch their arms, or, whatever they need to do to feel comfortable. And then usually taking 2 or 3 slow, deep breaths in and out, slowly, very slowly, can be very helpful also. And so I'll give you just a moment here to take 2 or 3 breaths and just feel yourself, when you exhale particularly, settling down. And I'm going to just be quiet here for a moment while I feel the room settle down, feel the energy in the room shift. Nice. And now in that settled state, and let this happen very spontaneously, very quickly, just either put out a request to the universe or ask for guidance about something. It doesn't have to be a big thing. Okay. You do that quickly, and we don't hold that. It's just there. It's just like a notion now in the back of our awareness. We're not really focusing on it, because focusing on it holds the mind at a grosser level, and we want it to just settle. So we just have that notion, we let go of it. It's like an intention. We just have some intention or some desire here. Oh, I wish I knew, I don't know why it came to me, what color lipstick to buy. I was looking at one of the ladies, and or something, making a decision, perhaps about some work that we're doing. Should I do this or should I do something, different, like that? You just have that notion, and then you let go of it. And then it's nice to take your attention into the center of your chest. Just let your attention go in there. Again, not trying to focus on it hard. Just let the attention shift in there. In Matrix Energetics, they talk about dropping into the heart. And that's because usually our awareness is in our head. That's where we're seeing, hearing, and thinking. We have a sense that our thoughts are in our head, not down in our heart. And so we just go down into that level of the heart. That's, of course, the level where the feelings are. Not all feelings, of course, because some of them are bodily sensations and some of them are even perhaps outside our body, but just dropping into the heart. The heart is the seat of my presence, of my witness of all of my experience. Everything happening in my day, in my life, in my environment, it's all swirling around my heart. And I notice what shows up instantly and spontaneously. What pops into awareness? What thought? What did you think of when you dropped in there? Can you remember? Happened quickly, didn't it? And again and again. Without judgment or interpretation. 2 really important words here: judgment and interpretation. So we do not try to judge it or analyze it. Now, in psychology, we're always analyzing. Well, why did you feel that way? What was the feeling that you had when that happened? When we do this work, we do not judge. We do not try to interpret or turn it into a story. Interpretation is basically taking some information and turning it into a story, trying to explain it, why it happened or what it means, or like that. Because guidance is just the flow of nature's intelligence. And it's gentle and it's soft and it moves us this way and that way. And it's very important to recognize that it's not always constant. That is, it's not like divine guidance says, now you're going to go this way, you're going to go do that. And you're not going to be able to do anything else but that. Because guidance sometimes will take us in one direction and then seemingly take us somewhere else. And if we're stopping to analyze why that happened, we lose it. We lose the guidance, we lose the sense of, oh, nature wants me here, and now it wants me over there. So we have to be very innocent. So no judgment, no interpretation of what pops into our awareness. Just we notice what shows up. Notice what we notice. The word note, the second noticing what we notice, is that things come into our awareness. And the idea is that they were always there, we just didn't notice them. Because guidance is not bound in time, although it may set a direction for us in time. It certainly does. But there's a sense of the eternity of it all. And now we're this way, and now we're that way. That's all within the field of time. But the guidance is eternal. It's always underlying our awareness. So we accept what shows up without questioning it, without saying why. Why is not a good word in this work. Now, if a question arises while we have, some impulse comes to us, some thought, some image, if a question comes, it's usually because something inside me is worried about the consequences of following the guidance. Well, if I do that, then that could happen. I won't be able to do something else, or I will neglect something, or something that happens as a result of that could be very bad. I wouldn't like that. And so we resist. The other possibility is that something inside me simply fears change. This is, for some people, huge. This is one of the main obstacles to following guidance and to living a life in harmony with nature's intelligence, the guidance that nature is giving us, is that we simply are afraid of changing. I won't quit my job because I feel very secure here, and if I quit my job, I don't know if I'll have other income, or may not even look for another job, simply because putting myself into a new work environment may be more scary than staying in the work environment I'm in, even though I'm either dissatisfied with the salary or the working conditions, the situation itself, like that. So just fearing change can be a big issue. And if that happens, then we may have to take a little time and put our attention on the part of us that is afraid of the consequences or afraid of change itself, just having to deal with a new situation. I'm sure you know people, I'm sure it doesn't apply to anybody on the webinar, but I'm sure you know people that if you think back, the best way to see this is at a high school reunion. And you find people who are exactly the same as they were when you knew them in high school. They still talk about the same stuff. They still do the same things. And basically, even their employment and everything is kind of what it was when they graduated, or soon after they graduated, either high school or college. And it's like life never evolved. It just stopped. They got to a place where they were what they felt was comfortable. They accepted the limitations of their life and never changed it, mainly because they were afraid to. And so they just sat on the impulse of nature that would always keep us moving along, always keep us growing and changing in life. So those two things, fear of change and fear of the consequences of following the divine guidance that you're receiving, are the two of the biggest obstacles. And the main treatment for that is simply simply notice that, oh, there's a resistance to that guidance that I'm receiving. I have this thought, I should go do that. I should change my job. Oh, but, and I notice there's a but. There's something stopping me, something holding me back. Now, the typical thing that we do from our experience in life in modern society is to try to analyze why we have that. What I'm suggesting is it's actually more useful not to analyze it, just to notice that it's there. Oh, where is that resistance? Sometimes asking where it is a very, very useful thing, because the attention will go to that aspect, and then we will feel it. We'll feel it just dissipate. And then there's no longer the resistance. We're able to make the move that we need to make, and then we're much happier. And that's a really important thing, is acting on the guidance that comes to you innocently. It's there, so I will do that. Even if it doesn't make sense, even if it seems scary, even if it maybe is going to lead to some challenges or some difficulties, we just do it without trying to make something happen, without trying to make it happen. We just do it. And not by force of will, because that's a very common thing. And most people believe that if you're going to accomplish something, you have to really focus on it and make it happen and overcome resistance and overcome any kind of obstacles that may come and people that may get in your way, and you just make it happen. I'm sure you know people, and you may even have occasionally had the tendency within yourself to try to force something to happen by sheer will. And that means that you're seeking a particular outcome. But nature often, excuse me, I'm just making myself more comfortable. Nature often isn't trying to achieve a particular outcome. It's trying to take us through a kind of experience. And so if we're open to just being with the experience rather than trying to achieve a particular result, then we fulfill what nature's actually trying to get us to do. And that may require quite a bit of flexibility, which means checking in moment by moment as you're going along. Is this what nature's taking me to? Can I feel that pressure to go in that direction? And then we just do it. And it may not be, as I say, and I think I've said it now about 10 times, it may not be the most wonderful thing that we could imagine, but it may be what nature requires of us at this time so that we can fulfill the growth that nature wants for us. Now, there's another possibility that I think we need to consider, and that is if the guidance doesn't come to us. We ask a question, and the mind just goes blank. There's nothing there. That can be frustrating. Or the direction that we seem to be headed in by nature's guidance doesn't seem to be leading anywhere. It's just like we're on a path. The path isn't going anywhere. We're just still on a path. And so we may want to ask at that point, what's blocking me? I just ask myself, blocking me? Is there something blocking me, keeping me either from perceiving the direction or from perceiving, noticing what it is that I'm supposed to be doing as I'm moving along the way nature's intending me, and nothing's happened yet. And if the answer to that is no, there's no blockage, then fine, we just go that way. I saw a recent example of that. It was quite fascinating, where a person was trying to accomplish something and it wasn't happening. And so I asked the question, have you checked to see if this is actually what nature wants for you right now? And the key thing was the right now. And I helped them a little bit with that. I checked in too. And what I got was not now, later. It just wasn't the right time. It wasn't that it wasn't something that nature didn't want for that person. It's that it wasn't the time to manifest it. So that's another possibility. And that's why checking in is important, because if you check in and you get the feeling like there's nothing there, I'm not, it's like I think I want to go this way. I think nature wants me to do this, but I'm not feeling that subtle impulse. I'm not getting any messages. I'm not seeing any signs that says this is it. Maybe it's later. And you check in with that, and you may get that very comfortable feeling. Yes, it's later, not now. And just accept that. Or you may find that you perhaps have slipped some intellectual consideration or some level of desire born of some impressions of experience, which we call stress, has taken you in a particular direction. And oh my goodness, you check in and it's maybe not really true. Maybe that isn't really the direction that nature was trying to take you. That it was more from a more superficial level of your existence, some impression, some stress that was making you feel like that was the direction to go. So I'm going to take just a minute to summarize these steps and kind of bring this discussion to a conclusion. So step at the beginning is get settled. Let yourself settle down, and if necessary, do some things that help that process. And then in that settled state, put out either a request or ask for guidance. I want something, or I want guidance. I'm open to guidance, whatever you want, whatever nature intends. And then drop down into the heart. Let your attention shift into the center of your chest and just be there. And you don't need to be there very long before something shows up, usually an instant, literally. So notice what shows up innocently, spontaneously, without judgment or interpretation. What pops up there? It takes some practice to be able to do that, to actually notice what's in the mind, or body, the sensations that you have, the feelings, to notice what's there. And again, in the work that I do, particularly if I'm doing diagnostic work for some physical thing, it's like just approach the person. It doesn't have to be a physical approach. I can do this remotely. They can be halfway around the world. And just, what does nature want me to see? And wherever my attention goes, that's significant. That may not actually be where the problem is, but it's where my attention needs to be in order to get to that. And then accept what shows up without questioning it. And if questions arise, then look to see what's worrying, what's causing, what fear may be there, or any other kind of blockage that might be there. Just notice what's there. And that's all you have to do, just notice that it's there. It's, I'm afraid of changing. Okay, I'm afraid of changing. Something inside me is afraid of changing. You just sit with that quietly. And then, of course, it's really important, when we get guidance, to act on it. It seems like almost a silly thing to say, but it's actually very important, because a lot of times we don't act. And again, why don't we act? Because it seems strange. It means a big change in life, and I'm maybe not willing to accept that. Or we just doubt our experience. But hopefully, if you go through this process and you keep reminding yourself to go through the process, you get so you really trust what's going on. You trust what shows up when you just innocently ask a question or just innocently put your attention on where should I be going. And then if guidance doesn't come, or the direction that you seem to be moving in doesn't seem to be going anywhere, then you can ask, what's blocking that experience? So with that, I think I'll draw this discussion to a conclusion, just reminding you that the impulses, the signs or clues, the messages that we get can make life so easy for us. It's like we're able to do what we're supposed to be doing, and then it's just nice. It's just so very comfortable and blissful for us. And you can do this just from the instruction that I've given so far. Just sit and feel what comes, ask the question, feel what comes, and then act on it. And life just gets easier and easier and more enjoyable. So thank you all for being here for this. I'm going to end this here and then move on to the group clearing portion of the evening.